r/AskReddit. Teenagers of Reddit. What did you think was part of puberty but really something else? I get extremely bad pains in my legs, which was suspected to be growth pains. Multiple doctor visits later, without my mother as she never believed me, and I was told I have very weak tissues in my legs that often tear or get inflamed, and had to start physio to try build them up more. My mother still thinks I'm lying, even though I have been diagnosed by professionals. It hurts. Same here. It always hurts so bad to work out. My parents still made me jog with them as a teenager and just told me I was being a baby. Turns out I have a connective tissue disorder, Ehlers-Danlos, and my joints pop in and out of place all the time. It hurts to jog because I'm using all my muscle strength to hold my damn bones together. Take care of yourself and treat your body kindly. I destroyed a lot of things through being stubborn and succumbing to pressure from others. I was feeling a very large disconnect from everyone around me, especially people my age. I constantly visualized being in a bubble separate from everyone else, and I had a hard time having conversations. But I just thought it was puberty, because I didn't want to self-diagnose, and I figured everyone else felt the same. Turns out it was Asperger's. Insanely heavy, painful period, massive weight gain, being uncontrollably mean to my mom and then crying because I didn't know why I was being mean to my mom. My puberty was so bad my mom took me to all kinds of doctors. She felt like I was possessed and also dying. I physically could not get out of bed on my period. Turns out I have PMDD, bipolar disorder and an underactive thyroid. I went on birth control at 11 to control the bleeding and mood swings. Mood stabilizers around 13 and then thyroid meds at 15 and life was much better. I'm a girl and grew a beard. Thought it was puberty but turns out I'm just Portuguese. LMAO, I feel you. I'm from northern Morocco and those Mediterranean genes are kicking in. Hairy ASF too. Losing the vividness and emotion of life. I thought society cherished and glorified childhood so much because everything feels so much more real and vivid back then. Turns out I just have a condition called derealization, lol. Edit. A lot of people have misjudged my meaning with this. Naturally, you do lose a lot of the emotions you feel as a child as you grow older, and that is not what I'm talking about. I mean that I have an actual disorder but I just chalked it down to that. By losing the vividness I mean literally losing the vividness. Like physically losing the vividness of life in my eyesight and hearing and being able to think clearly. I'm not saying that what some of you are experiencing isn't a big deal, because it definitely could be. It's just not the realization. Growing up I was really close with my cousin. We were the same age, lived in the same neighborhood, went to the same school, and had the same group of friends. I remember during junior high school he changed quite a bit, and at the time I didn't have the mental or emotional capacity to wonder why or figure out on a deep level what could have been happening. He used to be very fun, jovial, and enjoyed hanging out with me and my friends. Suddenly around the time we turned 11 or so, he became much quieter, preferred to keep to himself, and started becoming a lot more introverted. I figured that at that time we were all going through puberty, and as we learned in class, as our bodies change, so could other parts of our personalities. I figured, hey, I never liked girls before, but suddenly I want nothing more than to hang out with girls, and so he probably had a similar change, only with regards to his social preferences. I only recently found out, 20 years later, that his father got heavy into alcohol right around that time, and he abused him, definitely physically and verbally, possibly sexually. He didn't quite go there and I didn't push. His father ultimately left his family, and the story we were told at the time was that he was traveling for business but that everything was fine. So we had no choice but to accept this. It breaks my heart that at that time I could have been there for him. But I had no idea something deep was happening that was causing a fundamental change to my cousin's personality. I just assumed he was going through some natural changes and that his natural personality was coming out. But it turns out the worst thing that could happen to a child, having your parent abuse you, was happening. And that was the reason for his sudden change. Sheer exhaustion. Turns out anemia is common in teenage girls, especially when you have irregular heavy periods. I had this too. Looking at pictures from that time, I am shocked at how little color there was in my face. It's really scary. When I was a teenager, I always thought that having resentment towards my mom, single parent, was normal for that phase in life. Everyone told me I was just an overreactive teenager, going through changes, hypersensitive, and it would pass and one day I'll realize how lucky I am to have her. While I agree, she was a good mom, I still harbor a lot of resentment toward her over a lot of things, and my family was extremely toxic and would consistently diminish my feelings to make themselves feel better. It wasn't just a teenage mess of emotions. These were real problems that my mom couldn't be bothered with. It was more important for her to be the victim, and that hasn't changed still 20 years later. Most people are on the outside looking in and don't hear both sides of the story. Sometimes the smallest thing can lead to a life of depression, anxiety, and self-deprecating. In other words, you're not just finding yourself as a teenager. Life comes with constant growth and realizations. Don't ignore your instinct because everyone is telling you otherwise. Being awkward. Turns out I'm just doomed to always be a little awkward, lol. Not having a period for 8 months. Don't let any doctor tell you that's normal. For that long BC you'll eventually find out you actually have cos colon. Yeah, cos is so damn common yet so ignored or just not even thought of. Or they just don't care. My doctor didn't even bother to try and help me understand it or offer treatment. She was just like, yeah, you have PCOS. Bye. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 28 either. Ridiculous. When I was young I slept over at my friend's house. Woke up with my boxers soaked. I was so embarrassed that I had a wet dream for the first time. Not even at my own house. Turns out I just pissed myself. And that's why you pee before bed, kids. Got it? Pee the bed beforehand. When I was about 14 I started to hear a crazy amount of people yelling at me inside my head. I would just be sitting on my bed or something and it would absolutely overcome me. I heard my parents and siblings and friends all at the same time yell at me things I've actually heard the week before, and then everything in real life would be moving super fast and there was no way I could trick my mind into moving slow. I would actually move slowly but it would make it worse and I would just have to lay there and nothing would help. I attribute it to panic attacks but no one has ever been able to help diagnose it. Being hypersensitive. Turns out my family was just toxic. In the same boat, my family accused me of being hypersensitive when I told them they are emotionally abusive and manipulative. They got super offended and said, well, you've always been the dramatic and hypersensitive one in the family. I just said okay and tried to move on. At this point, it's pointless to try to change them or make them happy. All I can do is shut out their negative influence and just move on. Ah yes, the old "you're the black sheep" phrase. Mayo like, yeah, I'm the only one in this family who isn't ducked up. Karen. Being always afraid is to talk to people. Planning every word I will say to make sure I will not make any error. Looking at every single detail of them to make sure I'm not saying anything wrong. Turns out I have social anxiety. Not knowing what to do with my life. Reading. I didn't learn how to read till 9th grade. When I was in middle school my mom was like, you'll start reading soon, some people it just takes time. Not is changing in your body now. Wasn't till my freshman year of high school my mom was like, you need to start reading, and took me to a specialist, and turns out I have dyslexia. I'm 19 now, still pretty bad on reading and grammar. You could probably tell on grammar. It's a everyday struggle that not a lot of people understand what we struggle with. Side note, never make someone if they actually have some kind of mental issue. We didn't choose to be like that, it just happened. I'd much rather be normal. Had a horrible pain in my right arm. If someone even grazed up against it, it would feel like I got shot. It would also flare up at night, leading to many sleepless nights. I had multiple doctor visits and it was always just chalked up to growing pains. After dealing with it for 2 years, a doctor finally did an X-ray and found a, thankfully benign, bone tumor. Oh wow. Hi, mom here. Not a teen. My preteen has the flu a month or so ago. Time means nothing right now. He ran to the bathroom and got sick. I grabbed what I could to comfort him, and when he was done he asked me, is this puberty? I assured him it was just the flu. Puberty would suck too, but not like this. Regular nosebleeds. Turns out my allergies don't like the humid air. My nose starts randomly gushing blood in the winter. It doesn't like dry air, lol. The emergence of a deep-seated anger towards my parents. Television and media showed me that conflicts between teen and parent was a normal part of growing up and my unidentifiable, at the time, anger was just raging hormones. It didn't help that my family would sigh at me, citing my growing up as being the cause of the troubles. In some ways they were right. Turns out I was just beginning to understand that my parents were controlling bullies and they felt threatened and wanted to knock me down harder the more I tried to have my own identity and boundaries. Teenagehood sucks for so many kids. They're just trying to figure life and themselves out and get stereotyped and invalidated by society at large just because of their age. Completely hating my body and self in general. When I realized I had been going through gender dysphoria growing up, a ton of my childhood and adolescence just started to click into place. Very severe anxiety, and not having a supportive family. I was just told teenagers distance from their families, and it took me a hot minute to realize that my family just wasn't supportive of me. No matter how much other teens may distance themselves from their families, I was constantly looking to my family for any sort of support, which I never get. Not to mention it didn't help with the very severe anxiety. Still doesn't, but I've gotten over it. Being tired all the time. Parents told it was because I was a teenager. Suddenly we heard the news tons of people lacked D vitamin. Guess who lacked D vitamin by gaming all day? Obsessing over a friend. Turns out I am codependent. Fun times lol. Mayo for me, it just turned out that I'm actually gay and like them. I never had crushes on people. All of my friends always had a crush on someone. Except me. I convinced myself that once I got my period that I would start to want to date people, but no. I guess that's not how it works. Not a teenager anymore, but as I hit puberty I started getting horrific, blinding headaches and numb limbs. The doctor diagnosed me with puberty onset migraines and growing pains. It never got better, and at 28 I finally got a doctor to listen to me and do some tests. Turns out I have a condition where a small part of my brain is sitting in the top of my spinal column. Wish I'd pushed harder when I was young, as no one believed me that a migraine could cause me to lose my vision for up to 2 days, and they thought I was just acting up. That was when my lactose sensitivity kicked in. Milk always made me feel a little ill as a child, but I thought it was normal. Then I started getting really sick and my parents didn't believe me. So I spent several years being forced to drink milk every day and feeling really sick, but thinking it was the price of growing up. Dislocation of my kneecaps. Turns out that the groove in the leg they are supposed to sit in isn't fully developed or is too small or something. Since it's happened twice. First time I did it everyone was like, yeah, it happens around this age. Being sick every morning for years. Not sure what I thought it was. I just assumed everyone else woke up feeling terrible as well. Turns out I have horrible anxiety that was manifesting physically by making me nauseous. Bit of TMI. I started puberty early. So around the age of 10 I started having extreme pains all over my body. Before that I was always aching all over. I was covered in bruises and scrapes periodically my whole life. That doesn't mean I didn't know something was obviously wrong. My mother told me it was growing pains among a slew of other things to shut me up. I got used to not telling anyone I was in pain because I didn't want to be bleaching all the time and be annoying. Uncountable doctor's appointments later. At the age of 14 I was taken to the hospital to have a nerve conductive study, NCS. Turns out I have CMT. Once a month I would get super moody and pee blood. I thought it was just me getting my period. Turns out boys don't get periods. What I thought was normal back then turned out to be severe depression. I also thought being suicidal was normal as well. Love-hate relationship with my parents. Turns out, most of the time they're just jerks. I went through a seriously deep depression that my parents and I assumed had something to do with puberty. Found out years later that it may have been because I quit my ADHD medication cold turkey and was experiencing withdrawals. I thought I'd hate my parents, but it turns out I hate everyone. Crippling depression. I had always been a happy child but suddenly wanted to sleep or cry all the time. I had been warned about mood changes from fluctuating hormones, but this seemed extreme. Thank goodness the whole thing turned out to be a side effect of painkillers I was taking for an ear infection. Edit. This was years ago. I misread the question. When I was 12 my right nut was way bigger than my left. I thought it was just something that happened. Went in for a physical for football and it was a hernia. I was born with it or some shit. Not a teen here, but when I went through that it was super weird. The most amazing thing that happened was my beard growth. I had zero facial hair until 14. Turned 15 and I looked like a bear. I mean, grew so much in so little time. Scary at the time. Having such inconsistent feelings and thoughts. Turn out I had Asperger's. Almost everything being shitty. Turns out, I grew up in an abusive family, to put it nicely. The desire of killing myself. Turns out I had a real problem. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content bruh. It's free and that's a great price.